Hey there! Tonight, we're stepping into a different kind of story. Not the shining legend, but the cold, heavy truth beneath the armour. You won't find dragons here, or flawless heroes. Just a life built on duty, fear, bruises, and the quiet grind of surviving in steel, through battlefields, broken sleep, and the slow fade of glory. If this kind of storytelling helps you rest, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it actually brings you peace. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's oddly comforting to know who else is drifting off to the same slow march through history. So, dim the lights. Let the fire in your imagination warm the stone walls. Settle in, and let's begin with the making of a knight. You are 7 years old when the path to knighthood begins, not with a sword, but with a farewell. Your parents, proud and perhaps a touch relieved, send you off to serve in the household of a noble lord. There are no goodbyes written in ink or preserved in keepsakes. Only a pat on the shoulder, a bundle of clothing, and the weight of expectation settling on your small, still growing frame. No one asks if you are ready. In truth, readiness is irrelevant. You are a page now. The castle looms above you, stone towers stretching into a grey sky, its silhouette promising both greatness and hardship. The gate creaks open. What lies beyond is not a world of honour and glory, but one of scrubbing, serving, and surviving. Chivalry will come later, after years of fetching, carrying, and cleaning up after horses and noblemen with equally foul temperaments. Your duties are endless. From sunrise to well after dark, you run errands, sweep halls, deliver messages, and assist with meals. On especially lucky days, you're permitted to polish armour, which sounds glamorous until you realise it means scraping dried mud and horse dung from heavy iron boots. Your hands are blistered, your back aches, and the knights, they barely notice you. You are not yet one of them. You are the help. But even in these early days, training begins. Wooden swords are handed out like brooms, and bruises bloom across your arms as you spar with other boys who, like you, are eager to prove something. You're taught how to fall from a horse without breaking your neck. You fall often. Some days it feels like falling is the main lesson. No one praises you for bruising well, but they do scold you for weakness. You learn quickly. Pain is to be swallowed, not displayed. Discipline is everything. Speak only when spoken to. Bow deeper to those of higher rank. Never question a command, no matter how trivial or humiliating. Your mistakes are corrected with the back of a hand or a weak scrubbing chamber pots. One boy forgets to remove his cap in the presence of the lady of the house. He spends 2 days on his knees in the chapel, praying for humility. No one forgets again. If your family is wealthy, a tutor may be assigned to teach you reading, writing, and perhaps a bit of Latin, though the Latin mostly seems useful for understanding church services and inscriptions on tombs. If not, you learn by imitation. You listen. You memorize prayers. You copy letters with shaky hands when the steward is generous enough to share a scrap of parchment. Literacy is a luxury. Muscle and obedience matter more. Still, you learn. You learn which fork to use, though most prefer fingers. You learn to stand still for hours during court feasts, balancing platters of steaming meat while nobles talk politics and complain about the wine. You learn to stay invisible when tempers flare, and to disappear entirely when drunken knights start boasting about past battles. Every moment is an education in survival. Mornings begin with Mass. The castle chapel is cold year-round, and your breath fogs in the air as you kneel on stone floors and try not to fall asleep during the liturgy. Faith is not optional. It is as much a part of your training as swordplay. You are taught to fear hellfire, to respect the church, and to confess regularly. The priests speak of divine purpose, of holy duty. You nod along, trying to stay awake. Mostly you pray not to get sick. There are few remedies and fewer recoveries. Meals are brief affairs, usually consisting of bread, cheese and meat if you're lucky. Vegetables are suspect. Many believe raw greens cause illness, and so you develop a steady diet of salted meat and dry crusts. You eat quickly, knowing your next task waits. On rare feast days, there may be roast pig or honeyed oatcakes. These days are remembered for years, like dreams glimpsed through smoke. In the evenings, the hall grows lively. Minstrels sing ballads, recounting tales of Arthur and Roland and saints who slayed dragons. You sit on the edges, near the fire, trying to catch every word. The songs are meant to inspire, but you are too tired to be moved. You think more of your sore feet than of chivalric deeds. Still, something stirs in you. A hope, perhaps, that someday someone will sing of you. You sleep where you can, often in the servants' quarters, shoulder to shoulder with other boys, on straw pallets that smell of sweat and mildew. Some nights you are pulled from sleep to help with late arrivals or unexpected guests. You learn to rise without complaint, to work through exhaustion, to never let your eyes betray fatigue. A knight must be ready at any hour. The training starts here. You are not alone. Other pages suffer with you. You form silent friendships, built on shared glances and muttered complaints. Together you learn the rhythms of castle life. You learn which knights are cruel, and which will look the other way when you steal a second helping of stew. You learn who to trust, who to fear, and which corners of the castle offer a moment's peace. There are moments of levity, a jest from the cook, a clumsy knight tripping over a dog, a stolen apple. You cling to these moments. They remind you that life exists beyond duty, that laughter still has a place, even here. Occasionally, you catch a glimpse of the world beyond the walls. Merchants arriving with silks and spices, a troupe of performers, or a noblewoman riding past with her retinue. These sights feel foreign, like stories glimpsed through fog. You're not part of that world yet, but maybe, one day. At times, doubt creeps in. The stories of glory feel distant, the reality far more grinding. You wonder if all of this, the aching limbs, the scoldings, the hunger, is truly the path to honour. But every so often, you see a knight ride out in gleaming armour, pennant flying, and your chest tightens with the thought, someday that could be you. Your lessons in humility do not stop with bruises and hunger. There are also ceremonies to attend, even though you're barely more than background noise in them. You observe as nobles gather, dressed in fine fabrics you're not allowed to touch, much less wear. You're reminded, by their glances, and sometimes their words, that your position is somewhere between useful and invisible. When dignitaries visit, the castle becomes a theatre. You help prepare guest rooms, polish silver, and sweep the same corridors 3 times over. If anything is out of place, the pages are blamed. And if something goes wrong, say, a dog bites a visiting bishop's leg, well, Let's just say it helps to know how to avoid being seen. You quickly master the art of looking busy while being nowhere near the problem. On festival days, there is music, dancing, and too much wine, at least for the adults. You're allowed to watch from the corners, soaking in the sounds and sights while pretending not to be watching too intently. Occasionally, someone slips you a sweetmeat or a bit of cake, and for a moment the burdens of your position feel lighter. But these small kindnesses do not erase the reality. Your place is to serve, observe, and remember. Some pages find escape in books, if they can read. The old steward's chamber holds a handful of illuminated manuscripts, heavy, bound in leather, and guarded as fiercely as the Lord's own armoury. On lucky evenings, you're allowed to sit beside a fire and listen as an older scribe reads aloud tales of Roman generals or saints who endured unspeakable trials. These stories feed the mind while your body heals from the day's chores. There are warnings too, spoken in hushed tones or muttered by older servants. They tell you of pages who failed to advance, boys who cracked under pressure or were sent home in disgrace. Sometimes they vanish without explanation. Sometimes you overhear things you were never meant to hear. You quickly learn when to speak, when to nod, and when to keep your head down. The castle is your crucible, and every hour spent within its walls forges you into something harder, leaner, more capable. Not a knight, not yet, but no longer a child. You are a creature in transition, battered, disciplined, and quietly determined. So when you lie awake at night, staring at the wooden beams above your straw-filled mattress, you think not just of what you've endured, but of what lies ahead. The next phase, the next challenge, the next step on the path that will one day, if the gods, your lord, and your body all permit, make you a knight. But for now, you are a page, and that is enough. At the age of 14, the apron strings of pagehood are ceremoniously snipped, though not with any kindness or softness. You are no longer a page, you are now a squire. And while this new title may sound like a promotion, it comes with considerably fewer sweetmeats and far more bruises. You have graduated from polishing floors to polishing armour, from fetching goblets to fetching the man who might be dying in one. Your new role is personal, intimate even. You are assigned to a knight, and you are expected to serve him as faithfully as a shadow. Where he goes, you go. If he rides into battle, you follow. If he falls, you run into the carnage to help him up, risking your own life in the process. You're no longer a child of the castle. You're the squire of a warrior, and your days are shaped by his demands. The physical training increases tenfold. Riding a warhorse, for instance, is not the elegant glide you once imagined. These beasts are enormous, bred for power and war, and more temperamental than most noblemen. Mounting them is a small battle in itself. Controlling them, a constant negotiation. Your thighs ache. Your spine jars with every step. Your backside hasn't felt normal since Michaelmas. Sword training intensifies. You now wield live blades, not to kill, but sharp enough to cause concern if your opponent happens to be better rested or less distracted than you. You spar daily, your body covered in bruises that never quite fade before new ones bloom. Every session is an exercise in humility. For every swing you land, you take 3 in return. The knight you serve doesn't expect grace, he expects grit. But perhaps the most tiresome part of your duties is equipment care. Armour, you quickly learn, is not just metal. It is an ecosystem. Sweat, grime, and the occasional slug somehow make their way into the joints of plate mail. You clean it, polish it, inspect every hinge and strap. If the greaves pinch or the helmet visor sticks mid-battle, that's your fault. If your knight dies because you missed a cracked buckle, you'll likely wish you'd died first. Weapons need sharpening daily. Lances must be tested. Shields examined for cracks. Your knight's life and your reputation depends on the absolute precision of your work. No one thanks you when everything goes right, but everyone notices when it doesn't. And then there are tournaments. They were romanticised when you were a page, colourful affairs of trumpets and cheering maidens. Now you see the blunted swords break bones. You are the one saddling the horse, carrying the lances, wiping the blood from your knight's cheek so he can smile for the crowd. If he wins, you collect the prize money. If he loses, you collect his broken ribs and what remains of his dignity. When real war comes, and it does, you march beside your knight into mud, rain, and uncertainty. Campaigns are long, uncomfortable affairs. Food is scarce. Sleep is scarcer. Your armour, if you have any, chafes in places you didn't know existed. You begin to understand the real meaning of exhaustion, when your limbs move only because you know you must. Battle is not glorious. It is a cacophony of screams, metal, and orders lost in the wind. The clash of bodies, the stench of blood and sweat, the sudden silence of a dying man. These become your education. You learn to distinguish between fear that sharpens you and fear that paralyzes. You pray the former shows up more often. You are not there to fight, not yet, but that does not mean you are safe. When your knight is unhorsed, it is your job to reach him, lift him, pull him out of danger. Imagine dragging a man in full armour, each piece weighing more than a holiday roast, across a muddy field while arrows fall like rain. It is not heroic. It is back-breaking. And the reward is usually just the chance to do it again tomorrow. When your knight is injured, you tend to his wounds. If he is captured, you are expected to negotiate or deliver messages to secure his release. Sometimes this means dealing with men who would rather see him rot. You learn diplomacy, not from tutors, but from necessity. Your words must be careful, your posture humble, your tone respectful. Even your silence becomes a tool. There are moments, rare but real, when you feel proud. When you lead your knight's horse into a camp and heads turn to look. When he nods at you after a battle, bloodied but alive. These moments are fleeting, like sunlight through arrow slits. But they matter. They keep you going. Back at the castle, your duties continue. You train younger pages, passing on the same hard lessons you once learned. You serve at banquets, help organise hunts, and remain at your knight's side whenever guests of importance arrive. Your sword is worn, your boots are cracked, and you move like a man twice your age. But you are no longer a servant. You are being watched, evaluated, measured. The priests still expect your prayers. Your lord still expects your loyalty. Your body expects rest, which it rarely receives. But there is no turning back. The only way forward is through. You begin to think about your own coat of arms. What colours? What symbols? You dream about the moment of dubbing, the sword tapping your shoulders, the moment you rise not as a squire, but as a knight. It feels impossibly far. It feels inevitable. It feels both. Then there are the hard days. The days when you bury a fellow squire, trampled beneath a war horse, or run through by a lance that didn't look blunted enough. No one sings songs for squires. No one writes poems for the boys who almost made it. You learn to carry grief without showing it. You learn to keep working even as the ground shifts beneath you. If you are lucky, your knight teaches you more than battle. He teaches you how to think, how to judge a man's character, how to read a battlefield, how to lead. If he is wise, he teaches you when to speak and when to hold your tongue, how to pick your battles, and how to lose with grace. These are not things armour can protect you from, but they are just as vital. Winter brings new challenges. You now understand that a sword is only as effective as the hand that can still feel its hilt. Your fingers crack from cold, and the metal of your knight's armour feels like ice as you buckle it on each morning. Snow turns the training yard into a mire of frozen mud. Horses slip. So do you. You do not complain. The weather, like war, does not care how you feel. There is talk among the older squires, talk of glory, of rebellion in the east, of a king's summons. You listen, absorb, calculate. You've seen enough to know that glory often looks like a grave. Still, you would ride out tomorrow if called. The waiting is often worse than the war. You write your first letter. It is stiff, clumsy, and formal, addressed to your parents if they are still alive, and telling them little. You're not even sure where to send it, but writing it feels important. Like anchoring yourself, like proving you're still someone beneath the bruises, sweat, and steel. One night, after a feast, your knight, drunk on mead and nostalgia, tells you of his first campaign. He describes the rain, the hunger, the thrill of surviving the charge. Then he grows quiet. He stares into the fire and names 3 men who did not return. You do not speak. You are meant to listen. And remember, you practice daily, sometimes in secret. You mimic your knight's stance, his footwork, the way he holds his blade just before a strike. You copy everything, hoping that imitation will one day become instinct. You bleed. You limp. You learn. Then one morning, without fanfare, your name is called. You are to ride with your knight, not as an observer, but as his second. There is no sleep the night before. No sleep is needed. When you mount your horse, you are ready. Not perfect, not fearless, but ready. Your story is still being written, but already it is etched into the cold iron of swords, the dust of roads, the calluses on your hands. You are no longer a boy, not quite a man, but closer now. You are a squire, and you are becoming. You are 21 years old, or near enough. Some squires are knighted younger, some older, but the number doesn't matter half so much as the fact that someone in authority has finally decided you're ready. Ready to kneel. Ready to swear. Ready, in theory, to kill and die with a little more official ceremony attached. There's no sudden transformation. You don't wake up with a deeper voice or a firmer jawline. You're still sore from yesterday's training. Still have mud on your boots and a scar across your shoulder that won't quite heal. But this is the moment your entire youth has crawled toward. Your body bruised, your pride battered, your hands hardened by years of polishing, sharpening, carrying, and serving. It has all led here, to the day of your knighthood. It begins with solitude. You are given a chamber, small and cold, in which to pray, reflect, and fast through the night. There's nothing glamorous about it. Just stone walls, a single candle, and a chapel-supplied blanket that somehow manages to be both thin and scratchy. You kneel on the floor, bones aching, stomach growling, and try not to think about the warmth of the kitchens or the scent of roasting pork wafting from below. This vigil is meant to purify the soul, to prepare you to accept the sacred duties of a night. You're expected to meditate on the responsibilities ahead, defending the weak, serving your Lord, upholding the church. In practice, you spend as much time wondering whether anyone would notice if you had a sip of water or sat down for 5 blessed minutes. You are not alone in your discomfort. Dozens of squires have kept this vigil before you, some trembling with anticipation, others feigning serenity. You wonder which you are. You try to remember all the prayers, the creeds, the proper posture. You try not to think about the rumours of squires vomiting from nerves during the ceremony, or passing out mid-kneel. That would be unfortunate. Memorable, but unfortunate. Come dawn, you are escorted to the main hall. It is transformed for the occasion. Banners hang, candles flicker. Nobles, knights, and priests gather in ceremonial dress, whispering politely behind gloved hands. A hush falls as you enter. Your name is announced. You kneel. Your lord, or perhaps the king, depending on your station, approaches. He carries a sword, a symbol of service and power. It may not be his own blade. Some lords keep a ceremonial sword just for this purpose, polished to a mirror shine and never used in battle. You try not to look too closely. You try not to shake. The sword taps your shoulders, left, then right, the dubbing. In some traditions, you're also given a symbolic slap, a reminder of the physical and moral pain you must now endure without complaint. It's less of a blow and more of a firm pat, but the message is clear. A knight's duty is not to comfort, but to sacrifice. Then comes the oath. You speak solemnly, pledging loyalty to your liege, to God, and to the ideals of chivalry. You promise to defend the weak, to protect women, to speak truth, and to fight with honour. You repeat the words with as much gravity as you can muster, though you silently wonder how many knights still live by them. With the oath complete, you rise, not as a boy, not as a servant, but as a knight. The change is subtle, internal, and yet profound. People who barely glanced at you yesterday now nod in solemn approval. Your peers clap your shoulder. Your lord offers a tight-lipped smile, which by noble standards might as well be a standing ovation. There may be a feast afterward, depending on the wealth of your lord or the mood of the court. If so, you sit a little higher at the table, drink from a finer cup, and receive congratulations from nobles you once served wine to. Some squires are knighted on battlefields, their ceremony improvised amidst carnage. Others receive the full pageantry. Either way, the weight of the title settles on your shoulders, heavy as chainmail. Knighthood, as it turns out, is not a destination but a doorway. The world does not slow down for you to enjoy your new status. Your duties expand immediately. You are now expected to lead men, not follow them. To make decisions, not simply obey. To ride at the front, not the rear. The same sword that dubbed you a knight is now yours to wield, and no one will double-check your choices anymore. If you err, it will be public, and it will be costly. You're also now accountable in new ways. A knight's word is binding. Your signature carries weight. Your absence at court is noted. Your presence in church is assumed. If you drink too deeply or speak too freely, it reflects not only on you, but on your household, your banner, and your liege. A slip of the tongue can sour alliances. A drunken scuffle can undo months of diplomacy. In short, your margin for error shrinks dramatically the moment your shoulder is tapped with a sword. Your responsibilities extend beyond battle. If your lord grants you land, you are expected to manage it wisely. That means collecting taxes, settling disputes among peasants, maintaining roads, and ensuring the harvest is strong. Knights are often imagined as warriors alone, but in truth they are administrators, enforcers, and landlords. Your sword may rest in its scabbard for months at a time, but your seal is pressed into wax almost daily. You also now have your own squire. The irony is not lost on you. He is young, uncertain, eager to please. You teach him to polish your armour just so, to saddle your horse without bruising its haunches, to pour wine without spilling. You correct him gently, at first, then more firmly. He reminds you of yourself. It is humbling and slightly amusing to see how far you've come, and how far you still have to go. There is also the matter of your coat of arms. If you haven't had one before, it must now be chosen. Colours, symbols, family mottos, they all matter. They identify you on the field of battle and in court. They speak before you do. A red lion, rampant on a field of gold, says something very different than a black cross on a white bend. Choose wisely, or pay a herald to help. Your new armour is fitted to your frame, assuming your lord is generous or your family still has coin to spare. Full plate is expensive, and every piece must be custom made. Greaves for your legs, gauntlets for your hands, a cuirass for your chest. You stand still as the blacksmiths measure and clink, their fingers leaving soot on your skin. The weight is impressive. Walking in it feels like learning to move all over again, but you feel safe inside it too, as if metal might guard not only your body, but your name. You take your first formal ride through the village, not as a servant trailing behind a retinue, but at its head. Children run to the roadside. Old men bow stiffly. A woman tosses you a flower. You try not to look too pleased. The peasants don't cheer exactly, but they do stare, and in the medieval world, attention is a kind of applause. That night, in the solitude of your chamber, you remove each piece of armour slowly, methodically. You place your sword with care. You stare at your reflection in the polished plate and try to see what others saw today. A knight, a protector, a leader. You do not quite believe it yet, but you will. Not everything changes overnight. You still train each day. You still wake early and pray. You still limp after a long ride and wince when a blade catches your elbow. But your name is called with more weight now. You are consulted, not commanded. The younger squires eye you with something like awe or fear, possibly both. War will come again. You know this. And when it does, your position in the vanguard will be expected. No more standing behind a shield wall. No more waiting for orders. You will lead the charge, raise your voice above the din, and be the first to cross the field. If fortune favours you, you may return with honour. If not, your coat of arms will be carried home without you. This is the cost of the accolade. This is the burden of the oath. But still, you are proud. Not of your status, but of your survival. You endured the long years, the cold vigils, the humiliation, the training, the fear, and now you wear the title as a second skin. You are a knight, and your real service has only just begun. You do not become a knight and immediately feel powerful. You become a knight, and then you are handed 60 pounds of steel and told to get on a horse. The first real lesson of knighthood is not how to fight, but how to walk, breathe, and not fall over in your own armour. At first, it's chainmail, a hauberk of interlocking rings that drapes over your shoulders like an iron tunic. It's not as heavy as it looks, but it clings to you, drags at your limbs, and catches every drop of sweat your body produces. Beneath it, you wear a padded gambeson, quilted linen stuffed with wool or rags, which smells awful after a single skirmish, and worse after a week. But it keeps the mail from grinding against your skin like a cheese grater. As warfare evolves, so does your kit. Plate armour begins to replace mail. At first, just a breastplate and greaves, then pauldrons for your shoulders, vambraces for your forearms, sabatons to encase your feet, articulated joints, riveted segments, each addition designed to protect without pinching, though they almost always manage to do both. Eventually, you are sheathed in metal from crown to toe, and it's less like wearing clothes and more like being folded into a walking bell. The helmet is the worst. It muffles your hearing, narrows your vision, and steams up with your own breath. In battle, it protects your skull. Outside of battle, it functions mostly to give you a throbbing headache. Some helms have visors you can lift, which helps with breathing and spitting, though it also makes your face an easier target. Trade-offs are everywhere in armour. Mobility, surprisingly, is not impossible. You can run, squat, mount a horse, even roll, if trained well. But everything takes effort. You are not agile. You are deliberate. And you quickly learn to conserve movement, like a man counting his last coins. After all, if your opponent wears nothing heavier than boiled leather, he'll be darting around while you resemble a mobile sculpture of St. George. Then there's the maintenance. Every piece must be cleaned, oiled, inspected. A single rusted rivet can jam a joint. A dented chest plate can buckle under a second blow. Your squire becomes a blacksmith's apprentice overnight, scrubbing and hammering late into the evening. If he forgets a strap or fails to fasten your cuisses correctly, you notice, painfully and immediately. And let's not forget the weapons. Your sword is your constant companion, but not your only one. It is not the slim rapier of modern imagination, but a broad, weighty blade meant for hacking, not fencing. Its edge is kept sharp, but not razor thin, better to survive impact. You carry it at your side, but draw it only when necessary. The sword is both symbol and tool, and in your hand it becomes an extension of will. Then there's the lance. A knight without a lance is like a fish without gills, useless in open battle. The lance is not delicate. It is a sharpened pole, roughly 10 feet long, meant to be couched under your arm and driven like a battering ram into whoever's unlucky enough to be across the field. On horseback, it turns your momentum into deadly force, but it is also unwieldy, easy to miss with, and once broken, mostly good for poking campfires. The mace is a brutal companion, short, stubby, and blunt. No finesse, no elegance, just a lump of iron on a stick designed to cave in helmets and crack ribs. Useful when your enemy's armour laughs off blades. When subtlety fails, the mace makes its point with savage clarity. Axes are similar, less common among knights, more typical of mercenaries or those from northern stock. But in close quarters, an axe can hook a shield, split a helm, or drag a man off a horse. It's not considered gentlemanly. But neither, to be fair, is war. Shields serve both offensive and defensive roles. You carry one, usually kite-shaped or heater style, slung across your back or strapped to your forearm. It bears your coat of arms, a bright splash of symbolism amidst the mud and smoke. You learn to punch with it, to deflect, to absorb force. A good shield might save your life. A bad one might become your coffin lid. Siege weapons are a different beast altogether. Catapults, trebuchets, and battering rams handled by engineers and lower soldiers. You observe them more than operate them, unless you're particularly unlucky, but you'll learn to fear them. No armour can save you from a boulder. When battle comes, your kit is both saviour and prison. On the charge, you ride with couched lance, shield raised, visor down. Your world becomes a tunnel of noise and blur. Impact is sudden and absolute. You hit or are hit. You fall or you do not. And if you do fall, it is up to someone else, perhaps your squire, to drag you clear before the trampling begins. After the charge, if you are still upright, comes the melee. Sword drawn, you engage man to man. It is not graceful. It is a mess of grunts, blood, and clanging steel. You swing, you block, you pray. You aim not for heroics, but for joints. Armpits, behind the knees, visor slits, the weak points. Every knight has them. And if you don't find theirs, they'll find yours. In the aftermath, assuming you survive, you learn the lesser-known role of a knight, repairman. You remove your armour piece by piece, every dent and scratch telling its own small story. If a rivet snapped or a strap tore, it's noted, recorded and mended. Your sword is cleaned, inspected, re-oiled. Every weapon dulled must be sharpened. You don't sleep until your gear is ready again, because next time it could mean your life. You begin to appreciate the subtle differences between good steel and bad. You learn the smiths by name, the balance of a sword, the weight of a shield, the line where a helmet should rest against your brow. All become second nature. You grow fussy about details that once seemed trivial. The type of leather used in your gauntlets, the weight distribution of a new axe, the way a visor latches shut. Some knights personalise their equipment with flair, engraved pommels, crests, etched into breastplates, gilt inlays. You may do the same, if coin and vanity permit. But beneath the ornament lies the same brutal reality. Armour is not costume, it is coffin prevention. There are downsides, of course. Armour is expensive. Your share of spoils from war or tournaments often vanishes into repairs and replacements. And then there's the matter of heat. Summer in a full suit of plate is like walking inside a forge, especially in the midday sun. You sweat buckets, faint if you're not careful, and attract flies with all the grace of a walking roast. Despite it all, you come to trust your gear like a second skin. You've tested it under arrow fire. You've felt the jolt of a mace strike echo through your ribs and known the armour did its job. It protects, yes, but it also transforms. You walk taller in it. People part when they see you coming. Children point. Commoners bow. And yet, you know this. The steel does not make you invincible. It merely postpones the inevitable. You can fight well, prepare thoroughly, wear the finest forged suit in Christendom, and still fall to a lucky spear thrust or a well-placed arrow. A knight's tools buy time, not certainty. When you remove your gear at night, you do so slowly, reverently. Each strap undone, each piece lifted away, leaves you smaller, lighter, vulnerable. Beneath it all, you're still just flesh, bruised, stiff, and aching. And it's in those quiet moments, with your sword across your lap and your armour cooling on the stand, that you truly understand what it means to be a knight. You're not made of steel. You just wear it well, And so each day begins with the familiar ritual: lifting, strapping, adjusting, checking. Your squire tightens the buckles and hands you your gauntlets, his eyes scanning for wear, for weakness. You nod silently and step once more into the shell of your profession, because no matter how tired you are, or how many scars line your ribs, you are still needed. Still bound to ride out, to raise your shield, to stand between danger and those who cannot. This is the life you've built, plate by plate, blade by blade. This is the weight you chose to carry, and you carry it well. You were told there was a code, a shining, noble creed to live by. Chivalry, they called it. The very word sparkled with promise, like polished armour in morning light. It was meant to define what it was to be a knight: bravery, courtesy, honour, protection of the weak, reverence for the church. A lofty ideal, written in elegant script and praised from pulpit and poet alike. And then you rode into your first battle, watched a man in full heraldic splendour trample a retreating soldier, and realised the code is more of a suggestion. Chivalry, in theory, is a code of conduct, a moral compass for those who carry swords. Rooted in Christian values and feudal loyalty, it began as a way to temper violence with virtue. The church, ever anxious about the havoc wrought by idle knights, took pains to transform you from a hired blade into a holy defender. You were not simply to fight, but to fight rightly. In practice, however, chivalry is like a tapestry, grand at a distance, but fraying up close. The official tenets vary depending on which chronicler or cleric you ask, but some themes remain constant. Protect the innocent, defend the church, serve your lord loyally, show mercy to foes who yield, be honest, avoid unjust wars, and honour women, particularly those of noble birth. A fine list, admirable even, and also inconvenient. Because in the thick of battle, no one stops to recite their virtues. You swing, you survive. You follow orders, even if they involve torching a village suspected of disloyalty. You take prisoners, yes, but mostly because they're worth ransom. Mercy has a market value. As for honesty, it's encouraged, unless deception serves your lord better. A knight may be honourable in the abstract, but becomes remarkably flexible when land or legacy is at stake. Many a lie has been wrapped in noble language and delivered from horseback with great conviction. Protecting the weak sounds lovely in songs, but in the field the weak are often collateral. If your lord requires a peasant uprising crushed, you ride. If a convoy of commoners stands between you and the enemy's grain supply, you don't go around, you go through. The poor admire knights from afar, because they're rarely better off when one rides by. Then there is the matter of women. The songs speak of courtly love, of gallant men pining in poetic torment for unreachable noble ladies. In truth, your relationship with women is defined more by property law than poetry. Marriage is political. Romance, when it exists, is fleeting. And the protection you offer depends heavily on class. A noble woman might be revered. A washerwoman, less so. That's not to say knights are uniformly dishonourable. Many strive to live by the code. They pray, they tithe, they avoid unnecessary cruelty. But the world you inhabit rarely rewards restraint. A knight who hesitates to strike might not live to deliver mercy. A man who speaks the truth too plainly may find himself without land or head. Tournaments, oddly, are where chivalry shines brightest. In these stage spectacles, the rules are rigid, the honour real. You salute your opponent. You show restraint. You lose with grace. It's theatre, yes. but it's theatre where the actors believe in the script. And for a moment, the code becomes reality, if only briefly. There are manuals, actual written guides, that lay out knightly conduct in florid detail. One might advise you not to strike an opponent who has lost his helm. Another might say that if a lady drops her glove, you should retrieve it without stepping on it or staring too long at her ankles. The Church writes its own rules, more focused on piety. Attend Mass, confess sins, avoid gluttony, and above all, never forget who sanctioned your right to kill. These manuals are read aloud in courts and training halls. Some squires memorise them, others nod politely and return to sword drills. In truth, the code is interpreted differently in every household. Some lords emphasise loyalty, others demand ferocity. A few take chivalry so seriously they disown sons for showing cowardice. Others knight boys who haven't seen a day of battle simply for the right marriage alliance. What you learn, over time, is that chivalry is not a sword to wield, it's a mirror. Some polish it daily, others shatter it for convenience. You yourself try to follow the spirit, if not the letter. You help your squire when no one's watching. You spare an enemy who's yielded, though your comrades jeer. You ride back to a burning hamlet to escort a limping peasant out, because her child clutches your leg and says, please. These moments stay with you longer than most victories. They cost little. They feel like something old, something sacred. And yet, no bard will ever sing of them. Chivalry, you discovers, is not about grand gestures. It's about small decisions made when no one is looking. It's about being decent in a profession built around destruction. It's about knowing you are a weapon, and choosing sometimes not to strike. Still, the tension never vanishes. You kneel before a bishop one day and torch a granary the next. You cradle a wounded comrade, then trample a fleeing footman who happens to be in the way. You write your name beneath a pledge to honour and restraint, then sign orders that send starving men to their deaths. You begin to understand that the code of chivalry is less a shield and more a compass. It doesn't stop you from getting lost. It just gives you something to check when the fog sets in. Some days, that's enough. In the quieter hours, you reflect on the contradictions. The songs you once memorised speak of knights who slayed beasts and rescued virgins. Your life, meanwhile, consists of tax disputes, bloody marches and aching knees. You were promised glory. You were handed logistics. And yet, you don't resent it. Not entirely. Because sometimes the code helps you remember who you were supposed to be before the world got hold of you. You meet knights who abuse the code, who weaponize it. They quote scripture while pillaging. They preach honour and practice terror. You learn to recognize them by their polished crests and empty eyes. And you learn to step aside, or, when given the rare chance, stand in their way. You are not perfect. You've broken the code. You've struck men who had surrendered. You've taken spoils that weren't yours. You've stayed silent when you should have spoken. But you remember the faces of those who tried. The knight who held a gate so a village could flee. The one who refused to burn a monastery, even under threat of exile. The one who died kneeling, not in surrender, but in prayer. And so, in your own way, you keep trying. You carry the code not in scripture, but in habit. You pick it up like your sword each morning, knowing it may slip from your grip by nightfall, but reaching for it anyway, because without it, you are merely a killer. And with it, maybe, just maybe, you are something more. This is chivalry. Not what the minstrels sing, not what the priests preach, but what you try to practice in a world that gives you every reason not to. And so you ride, still bound to your oath. You defend your lord, fight his enemies, bury his dead. But you also feed your squire when the pantry runs low. You speak kindly to the old woman in the village who remembers when you were a boy. You return a dropped glove, even when no one is watching. You are a knight, and you remember the code, not because it makes you stronger, but because it reminds you what strength is for. One day, years from now, a boy will ask you what it means to be chivalrous. You won't recite scripture or point to crests. You'll hand him your sword and tell him to hold it steady. And then you'll ask if he can carry it without ever letting it fall on the wrong sole. That, you'll say, is a good place to start. Because in the end, chivalry isn't about purity, it's about persistence. About falling short and rising again, and choosing, however quietly, not to become the very thing you were once sworn to fight. And with each choice, you draw your sword a little straighter. You've trained for years, carried swords before you ever swung one, watched men die before you were allowed to charge, and polished your own armour so often you can still smell the vinegar and oil in your sleep. But none of that truly prepares you for this. The moment the trumpet sounds, your horse shifts beneath you, and the ground ahead fills with the bodies and banners of your enemy. The battlefield is not a stage. It is not an arena of honour or a chessboard of strategy. It is a pulsing, groaning thing, mud, blood, and metal wrapped into chaos. You can recite the names of old heroes, the codes of chivalry, the rules of engagement whispered by bishops in candlelit chapels. Out here, none of them matter. Marching to war begins long before the fighting. You ride for days, weeks even, through rain, sleet, and sun. The air grows worse as the army swells. Body heat, dung, and rotting rations blending into something foul enough to turn even the sturdiest stomach. Feet blister. Tempers snap. Your companions shift from camaraderie to muttering and silence. Men begin to smell like their horses. You do too. Camp life is brief and miserable. Tents flap in the wind like damp flags. Fires smoke more than they warm. You eat what's left. Salted meat, hard bread, dried peas. Sometimes you're lucky. More often you're not. Clean water is rare, and when it isn't, you worry what's floating in it. Armour is cold in the morning, blistering by noon. You sleep with your boots on and your sword within reach. And then one morning you crest a ridge and see them. An army arrayed across the field, their own banners snapping, their knights glinting in the rising sun. This is it. Your commander gives orders, shouted and relayed. Everyone nods. Few truly hear them. Your stomach tightens. You check your horse's girth strap. You say a prayer, or pretend to. You wonder how many will die before the sun sets. Then it begins. The charge is not graceful. It is thunder. Hooves tear the ground, lances lower, and every heartbeat counts down to impact. You aim your weapon and hope the man opposite you is slightly slower, slightly more afraid. The clash is bone-shaking. You might hit. You might miss. You might be hit. You might fall. And if you fall, you pray you can get up before the next wave tramples you. The noise is unrelenting. Screams, shouts, clanging steel, horses shrieking, men begging. There is no rhythm, only violence. You fight in flashes. A blade swings near your head. You duck. A man lunges. Your sword blocks without thought. An axe strikes your shield. You feel the shock in your teeth. You do not think in terms of heroism. You think in terms of inches. Every step forward might be your last. Every moment you remain standing is a small miracle. And all the while mud clings to your boots, blood slicks your grip, and the air tastes of iron and ash. There are no clean victories. Even if you survive, you've likely killed someone face to face. Looked into their eyes, seen their fear, felt their last breath on your face. No one teaches you how to live with that. Sometimes you lose your footing. A blow knocks you down, your visor jars loose, and suddenly the world above you is a blur of hooves and blades. You flail, crawl, push yourself to standing. If your armour catches in the mud, you're a turtle on its back. If your squire finds you in time, he might pull you free. If not, well, there are worse ways to die than being forgotten. You catch glimpses of others, knights unhorsed, peasants impaled, banners falling. You recognise faces, friends, comrades. They're gone in an instant, replaced by another swinging sword. There's no time to mourn, only time to breathe, and swing again. Sometimes the melee collapses into confusion. Orders become meaningless. Lines dissolve. You find yourself beside men you don't recognise, enemies mistaken for allies and vice versa. In those moments, the battlefield becomes its truest form. Not a clash of nations or ideologies, but a storm of survival. If you live, it ends not with trumpets, but with exhaustion. Your arms ache, your ears ring. Your horse, if still alive, is foaming and trembling. You stagger back to camp, strip your armour with shaking hands, and stare at your bloodied gloves. You hope it's not your own. You're not sure. Later, you walk the field. Crows already gather. Men groan where they lie, too wounded to move. You try to help, but there are too many. Some you leave with water, some with a whispered prayer, some you finish, because it is kinder. Your boots soak through with blood. You stop noticing the smell. Looters are already at work, stripping the dead of rings, purses, boots, sometimes even teeth. It's dishonourable, yes, but also practical. War is expensive, and a fallen knight's sword might pay for someone's winter grain. You turn your gaze elsewhere. You do not stop them. You find your comrades, those who made it. Sit with them beside a dying fire, each of you silent. Some clean wounds. Others just stare. No one boasts. No one drinks. You all know better. The ones who laugh after battle tend to cry when the fever sets in. There is no celebration. There is only tallying. How many were lost? How many banners captured? How many horses must be replaced? How many squires did not return? In the weeks that follow, the story is cleaned up. Minstrels compose ballads of noble charges and glorious stands. The Lord gives a speech. Priests declare it a righteous victory. You are paraded through the streets on your return. Flowers are thrown. Children cheer. You wave, smile, nod. But you remember the smell of the field, the look in the eyes of the man you skewered, the cries of your friend as he bled out beside a broken shield. You do not forget, this is the brutal battlefield. Not the battlefield of legend with shining armour and valiant duels, but the real one, muddy, terrifying, loud, confusing. A place where honour is a luxury, mercy is rare, and survival is a skill. You're no longer simply a knight, you are a soldier, a veteran. And though you ride on, polish your armour, train your squire, part of you will always be there, on that nameless field under that grey sky, sword slick with blood and breath fogging your visor. That part of you never truly leaves. You try not to talk about it, what really happened. When new squires ask, you give them lessons in form, in stance, in strategy. You do not describe the sounds. You do not mention the shaking hands. Not because you're ashamed, but because words cannot make sense of it, and because part of you is afraid they'd still want it. But you prepare them all the same. You train them to keep their shield up even when they're tired, to watch their footing, to check the straps on their greaves twice, not once. These small details save lives. You know, you've seen the cost when they're forgotten. Over time, your own scars fade, on the surface at least. Beneath, they remain. Not as wounds, but as memory. You remember the weight of the fallen knight you dragged from a trampled ditch. You remember the breathless silence just before the charge. You remember the way the field looked afterward. Still, broken, wrong, and still, you ride. Because someone must. Because the war never really ends. It only sleeps between battles. You do not seek glory anymore. You seek clarity. You seek survival. And you try in whatever way you can to make sure the men beside you come home. This is what it means to fight, not for banners, not for poems, but for the man at your left and the one at your right, for the squire who still believes in songs, for the prayer you whisper even when you don't believe. You are shaped by steel, but forged in the field. This is the brutal battlefield, and you have survived it. And in surviving, you have learned the cost of every inch of ground, measured not in paces, but in lives. You survive your first battle and then another, and though war never truly ends, it does go quiet. Armies disband, swords are sheathed, the banners come down. For a while there is peace, but a knight with no war is a weapon left idle, and idle weapons tend to rust. So you turn to the next best thing, the tournament. Not a brawl, not a massacre, though it might come close, but a staged battle dressed in heraldry, pomp, and profit. Where war is chaos, a tournament is choreography. Where battle makes legends, the tournament makes celebrities. It begins with an invitation. If your name carries any weight, or your lord's coin carries enough, you're summoned to a list field near a bustling town where the banners fly as high as the entry fees. You arrive with your squire in tow, your armour shined to near blinding polish, your horse combed and plaited like a bride's hair. The grounds are prepared days in advance. Wooden stands rise from the grass. Merchants set up stalls selling meat pies and pewter tokens. Minstrels rehearse songs they hope to sell before the jousts begin. Children run between tents, shouting names of their favourite knights. Yours may even be among them, if your last performance was sufficiently bloody. But make no mistake, this is no gentle pastime. A tournament is as dangerous as any battlefield, only better lit and more politely announced. There are two main events, the melee and the joust. The melee is a grand mock battle, dozens of knights on foot or horseback charging each other across an open field. It is said to mimic real combat, though it rarely obeys real combat's rules. The goal is to disarm, unhorse, or bludgeon your opponents into submission, preferably without killing them. Not out of mercy, but because corpses don't pay ransoms. You enter the field with your team, shield emblazoned with your arms, heart thudding behind your breastplate. Horns sound. The crowd roars. You lower your visor and plunge in. The fight is real enough. Blades are blunted, yes, but not harmless. Bones are broken. Teeth are lost. Pride always is on the line. You strike, you're struck. You fall, you rise. Somewhere in the din, your name is shouted, either in triumph or concern. Sometimes both. The melee is over when only a few remain standing, or when the judges decide it's become too undignified. You leave the field limping, exhilarated, exhausted, or sometimes unconscious. If you perform well, your reputation grows. If you perform poorly, you pretend not to care while discreetly checking for bruises. Then comes the joust, the jewel of the tournament. One knight, one lance, one pass. The tilt rail separates you from your opponent, and both of you thunder forward on horseback, trying to shatter your lance on the other's shield, helm, or chest. Points are awarded. Helmets are dented. Occasionally, ribs are cracked. More than one knight has died beneath the applause of the crowd. There is spectacle to it, enough ceremony to rival a wedding. Your name is announced. Trumpets sound. A lady ties a ribbon to your lance. You bow to the stands, salute your opponent, and take your place at the end of the tilt yard. Then the flag drops, and all that pageantry disappears beneath the pounding of hooves and the narrowing of your world into the tip of your lance and the target ahead. When you hit cleanly, the crack of impact echoes like thunder. Splinters explode, the crowd cheers. If you're thrown, you hit the earth hard and lie there long enough to remember that mud has no chivalry. Victory brings coin, and more importantly, notice. Lords watch from the stands, scanning for talent, potential, or marriageable fame. If you impress the right person, your fortunes can change overnight. If you make a name for yourself, you may find yourself invited to bigger circuits, tournaments in Paris, London, or Rome. Or at least the stories say so. But not all jousts are equal. Some are friendly, honour-bound, and carefully judged. Others are bloodier, more corrupt. There are whispered tales of knights bribing marshals, sabotaging armour, or switching lances to unblunted tips. And every tournament has its share of bad blood, feuds reignited, insults answered with steel. Then there are the injuries. Dislocated shoulders, shattered wrists, concussions. You learn quickly not to remove your helmet until you're sure your ears are still working. Even spectators are not always safe. A splintered lance once flew into the stands and took out a merchant's eye. He still comes to watch every year from the other side. Outside the arena, the tournament is a fairground. Traders hawk everything from relics to roasted chestnuts. Scribes sell poems composed on the spot. Apprentices duel with sticks in the mud while mimicking your name. At night, bonfires crackle, ale flows freely, and minstrels sing songs that exaggerate every blow landed and every favour won. If you've earned a few bruises, you might at least earn a few verses. The nobles host feasts. You attend, cleaned and laced into a doublet that fits like punishment. You bow. You drink. You endure conversation. A lady might ask about your technique, though her interest may have less to do with lances and more to do with inheritance, or scandal, or both. Tournaments are also a place for politics. Alliances are struck, rivalries flare, and lords make quiet wagers behind their goblets. A win on the field can lead to a contract, a vassalage, or a sudden engagement. A loss, on the other hand, might be remembered long after your ribs have healed. For all their glitter, tournaments are expensive. Entry fees, armour repairs, horse care, tents and bribes. It all adds up. A poorly managed campaign can leave you poorer than when you arrived. Some knights take loans. Some sell off land. A few turn to less savoury methods. Gambling, extortion, even rigging matches. Still you return. You always return. Because there's a thrill to it. A pulse that nothing else matches. Because the crowd remembers your name. Because a good tournament win can do what 5 years of border patrol cannot. It lifts you. It announces you. It makes you visible. And in a world where power rests in perception, visibility is everything. You ride in, you fight, you bleed, you bow. And when you win, you smile with broken lips. Because for one fleeting moment, you are not just a servant in steel. You are the main event. You are not at war, but you are in combat. This is the tournament circuit, and you are still standing. By the end of the week, your body is a ledger of bruises, scratches, and indignities. Your squire works late into the night restoring your kit. You spend the evening swishing watered wine, pretending your shoulder doesn't throb with every breath. A blackened eye makes you interesting company at supper. The limp adds character. You don't speak of the fear. The heartbeat just before the lance drops. The instant you wonder if the next hit will be clean or final. You swallow it down, tuck it beneath the layers of steel and swagger. Every knight does. Fear is common, admission is not. If the tournament was good to you, you leave with coin, a new favour tied to your saddle, and invitations for the next event. If not, you leave with empty hands and full regrets, already calculating how many tournaments it will take to rebuild what you spent chasing glory. The road away is quieter, less triumphant. A few companions ride with you. One coughs blood, another cradles a wrapped hand that may never hold a lance again. The squires chatter, still enchanted by the show. They do not yet understand the price of applause. And so, bruised but intact, you return to your estate or your garrison, where the real duties await. But for a week, you are more than a soldier. You are spectacle. You are legend. You'll do it again. Because while war may forge your reputation, tournaments let you write it in gold. And sometimes that is enough. Because in the eyes of the crowd, you are not just a knight. You are a name, a banner, a force in motion. And for a brief, shining moment, everyone saw you shine. The trumpets fade. The tournaments end. The battlefield falls silent. And you return not to rest, but to something more complex, responsibility. Because you are not only a knight, you are also a lord's vassal, a landholder, an enforcer of law and order. And whether your fiefdom is sprawling or small, it demands as much from you as any joust or skirmish ever did. Your estate, such as it is a patchwork of thatched roofs, grazing fields, and stubborn people. It was granted to you, often in reward for service, and with it came a host of obligations. Not to the land, but to those who work it. They do not know you as a warhorse rider or a lance wielder. They know you as the man who demands grain in October, sends bailiffs to settle quarrels, and sometimes rides through the village just to remind everyone who owns what. Your mornings begin not with sword drills, but with ledgers. Your steward rattles off figures. Bushels harvested, taxes collected, debts outstanding. You nod like you understand, though half the time you don't. There's always a shortfall. A pig vanished, a crop failed. Someone died with coin still owed. The solution invariably involves more paperwork and fewer pigs. Then come the petitioners. Peasants queue at your hall to air grievances. He stole my goose. Her cow trampled my barley. Their son struck mine with a stick. You sit beneath a banner bearing your arms, listening with the weariness of a man who's faced arrows and would prefer them to this. Justice must be swift, or at least loud. You nod. You fine. You send men to inspect fences. The villagers shuffle out, mostly satisfied. You hope? Disputes between peasants are one thing. Disputes between your men-at-arms are worse. When two armed retainers argue over boundaries or livestock, swords rattle. You must step in, not as a fellow knight, but as their master. Firm, even-handed, a man of authority. It's a delicate thing, projecting strength without escalating tempers. You manage, mostly. You also collect taxes, grain, wool, coin, or goods in kind. These are tallied, stored, and forwarded up the chain to your liege lord. Some of it you keep to pay your men and maintain your household. Some vanishes into the hands of clerks, never to be seen again. You suspect a fraction feeds the bishop's cellar or funds your lord's latest embroidery habit. But questioning the chain of feudal economy is like questioning gravity. You nod, sign, and send the ox cart on its way. Inspections follow. You tour your own fields, riding slowly between rows of barley and flax. You speak to the reeve, the village-appointed overseer, who informs you of labour shortages and brewing discontent. You pretend not to hear the mutters from the hedgerows, about rents, about levies, about your fine new scabbard that probably cost more than a plough. You smile, offer a nod, and ride on. Respect is maintained less by affection than by distance. Your hall must be stocked and guarded, your garrison drilled, your walls maintained, and your steward reminded that the grain cellar smells odd again. You oversee the blacksmith, the cooper, the baker. You approve repairs to the millstone, arrange timber for winter, and, once a month, host a feast for local tenants to keep up the illusion that everyone is cheerful and loyalty is mutual. You arbitrate marriages, approve apprenticeship contracts, and on occasion deliver punishment. Thieves may lose fingers. Poachers might pay in coin or days of labour. There are gallows, but you rarely use them. They're more useful as symbols than tools. Still, when necessary, you remind the village what happens when law is ignored. The church is ever present. A priest serves your estate, and you contribute to his chapel's upkeep, lest your name find its way into a sermon. You attend Mass, confess sins you vaguely regret, and make donations that conveniently match your most recent misdeed. Piety, after all, is easier in coin than in conduct. Even your household requires managing. Your servants rotate between loyalty, incompetence, and mild insubordination. The cook is furious about the flour quality. The stable hand swears the hay shipment is late again. One of your chambermaids is scandalously friendly with a visiting knight, and you must pretend not to notice unless it causes a child, or worse, a rumour. Your squire needs training. Still, always. He forgets your saddle straps. Leaves your sword unsheathed during rain. Once he polished your boots with lard. You scold him, train him, threaten to send him to the monastery, then end the day praising his effort with a nod. That's all the boy really wants. Your wife, if you have one, runs her own part of the estate, organising the kitchens, managing servants, keeping accounts. She is as sharp as your sword, and twice as terrifying when crossed. She reminds you when rents are due, when your cousin's widow expects a letter, and that the priest caught you dozing during Mass again. You learn to listen. You also learn never to suggest she host the next feast without preparing for a 3-day argument about table linen. In times of famine, your role becomes one of reluctant judge and reluctant beggar. You appeal to your lord for relief, while rationing what little you have. You know that if the people starve, the manor weakens. A dead peasantry tills no fields. So you offer just enough to keep them working, and just enough to keep their envy from turning to rebellion. In times of plenty, you are generous, but visibly so, bread handed out at the chapel door, coins tossed during feast days. It is not charity, it is theatre, it keeps order. The peasants call you my lord, but you're not quite sure whether it's respect, resentment, or resignation. Likely all three. They bow low, but you see the flickers of judgment in their eyes. You ride past them, heavy in your saddle, armour gleaming. You are their protector. You are their tax. You are their judge, and sometimes their executioner. Occasionally, you host visiting knights or minor nobles. These visits are equal parts hospitality and hostage negotiation. You must appear wealthy but not wasteful, powerful but not threatening. A wrong word about the king's taxes could brand you disloyal. A poorly cooked pigeon could insult your guest's cousin, who happens to be an earl. You walk a knife's edge of politeness, pageantry, and performance. But it isn't all caution and governance. There are quiet moments. You ride alone at dawn through dew-wet fields, nodding to shepherds who've been up longer than you. You sit by the hearth in winter and listen to your steward mumble accounts while the fire cracks behind him. You share a drink with your sergeant-at-arms, both of you old enough to admit your backs ache more than they used to. You are lord of your manor, but also its captive. You cannot leave for long. Bandits might strike, the grain might rot, your cousin might try to press a claim. Even a trip to court feels like abandoning a child to nurse itself. And when you return, something is always broken. A gate, a contract, a fence, a nose. Still there is pride in it, not in the power, but in the structure. You keep this place standing. You feed 100 mouths. You settle disputes before they boil into feuds. You remember names. You attend baptisms, funerals, and harvest dances. You kneel beside the dying and sign contracts for the newly wed. You are woven into the land's rhythm, into its heartbeat. This is the other life of a knight. Not glory, not gore, but governance. And though it will never be sung by minstrels or carved into stone, you know the truth. A knight's blade defends his name, but his estate keeps it alive. Because in the end, when the sword is sheathed and the war drums fade, it is not your victories that remain. It is your land, your people, and the fragile peace you hold together, one decision at a time. When the halls fall quiet, the ledgers are closed, and your sword is back on its rack, you are left with something less discussed and poorly romanticized, your private life. You'd think, after tournaments, campaigns, and estate matters, that you'd collapse each night into dreamless slumber. You'd be wrong. Rest is elusive. Comfort is intermittent. The truth is, sleep is a luxury in a knight's world, and one that must often be negotiated. Your bed is not the down-filled paradise of later centuries. It's a wooden frame, stuffed with straw or wool, covered in linen that smells faintly of dust and fatigue. You share it perhaps with a spouse, or alone, or occasionally with your armour spread out to dry beside you, ticking softly as the heat leaves the metal. You do not sleep through the night. That isn't how things work. You sleep in shifts, broken by prayers, patrols, and old wounds that ache more as the hearth burns low. Some nights you're summoned to settle a dispute in the barracks. Other times you simply lie awake, replaying a tilt that went badly or wondering whether the steward lied about the granary again. But it's not all gloom. There is laughter too, and warmth that does not come from fire. Your hall is more than a court of judgment. It's your hearth, your theatre, your lounge. Minstrels sing by the fire. A bard may be passing through and recite tales of distant wars or love-struck princes. You know the endings already. You enjoy them anyway. Familiarity is its own comfort. Games are played, dice, chess, backgammon. You cheat occasionally when no one's looking. Or you lose grandly, blaming the firelight or the drink or the suspicious angle of the table. Your companions groan, laugh, and pour more wine. The feasts, when they come, are rowdy affairs. Not grand like a royal banquet, but full of noise and roast meat, of ale spilled on floor rushes and laughter that echoes up the rafters. You sit at the high table, but not far from the hearth. You drink with your men, toast your squire, throw the occasional bone to the hounds beneath the bench. A juggler might perform, or a fool, his jokes barely veiled insults about local clergy or visiting nobles. You laugh louder than necessary, if only to show the guests that yes, you can take a joke. It's a fragile peace, maintained by roast pork and stale bread. Sometimes the evenings are more subdued. A servant plays the lute. Your wife embroiders, humming a half-remembered hymn. You nod off in the chair by the fire, only to wake when the logs collapse in a burst of sparks. For a moment, everything is still. Your household sleeps early. The servants rise before the sun, so they vanish quickly. Your squire lingers, hoping for praise or advice, or just not wanting to go back to the straw mat beside the armoury. You send him off gently. He's earned his rest, even if you haven't. You might wander the manor at night. Old habits from years on campaign, checking locks, peering into shadows, listening for anything amiss. You don't expect to find anything, but sometimes you just need to move, to feel the floor under your boots and remind yourself you're still here, and the fire is still lit, and the walls are still yours. When storms roll in, sleep becomes nearly impossible. Wind howls through the shuttered windows. Rafters groan. You recall nights in the field when the only shelter was a cloak and the back of a horse. You remind yourself this is better. You almost believe it. Private life also means private thoughts, and these are harder to manage than fields or squires. You wonder if the land is truly yours, or just held until a richer man wants it. You think about the faces of the men you've killed. Some you remember, some you don't. You think about your father, and whether he felt this same pull between duty and doubt. On better nights, you write, or try to. You scratch letters onto parchment, recording expenses, or drafting stiff, formal notes to other landholders. Occasionally, you attempt poetry. It's terrible, but your steward pretends otherwise, and your wife hides the worst of it before guests can find it. When guests do arrive, your private life vanishes. Everything becomes performance. The hall is cleaned. The good wine is brought out. You laugh at the same joke twice, and endure stories about hawks that flew higher and horses that ran faster than any in your stable. You nod. You flatter. You endure. But when they leave, when the doors are shut and the boots have stopped echoing, you allow yourself the rarest indulgence of all, silence. You sit beside the fire, cup cooling in your hand, and let the hush stretch. No battles to plan, no taxes to collect, just the sound of wood crackling and your own breath in the dark. Your body is a map of scars. You know which shoulder clicks in the cold, which ribs ache when it rains. A broken finger from a tournament in Kent, a scar on your thigh from a skirmish near the border. These pains are familiar. You greet them like old comrades. You've learned not to complain. Everyone aches. The squire asks once if you ever sleep well. You smile. Tell him yes sometimes, when the fire burns low and the dogs don't snore. It's a lie, of course, but it's the kind you tell kindly. And there are dreams, vivid, strange, persistent. Sometimes you're back in battle, reaching for a sword that isn't there. Sometimes you're walking the halls of your childhood home, except the walls are crumbling and no one speaks your name. Once you dreamt of flying, above fields, rivers, and the manor itself. You woke up smiling for once. Not every moment is grand. Most are not. There is mud tracked into the hall, a loose floorboard that catches your boot, a spilled bucket, a burnt loaf, a cough in the night that makes you sit upright and listen until it passes. These are the details of living. These are what fill your time between swords and steel. On feast days, the private bleeds into the public. There is dancing of a sort. You watch more than you participate, but sometimes you're pulled into a circle, clapping along to a song that's older than the church itself. You step stiffly, laugh at your own footwork, and your wife laughs louder. The servants smile, if only for a moment. You give gifts, bread, cheese, sometimes coin. Children chase each other through the yard, while the elders sit in the sun and pretend their knees don't ache. For an afternoon, no one is taxed, judged, or summoned. You watch, not as a lord, not even as a knight, but as a man. Just a man, quietly grateful. Your dog rests its head on your boot. You scratch behind its ears and let your shoulders sink. You're tired, but not in the way battle tires you. This is a deeper ache, the kind that comes from carrying not just weapons, but people, place, and purpose. And still you do it, because there is a rhythm here, a strange, stubborn peace between duties. Not comfort, not ease, but something closer to meaning. This is the private life of a knight, and it is harder to master than war, because though the chronicles record your battles and your banners, it is these quieter hours, half-forgotten songs, unfinished letters, the hush of a sleeping hall, that truly tell the story of who you were. You rise with the dawn, joints aching, the cold seeping deeper than it used to. The steward greets you with a nod. The squire follows, quieter than he was in years past. Nothing feels unusual at first, until you step outside and realise something has shifted. It's not in the air or the weather, but in the rhythm of the world itself. Fewer hooves on the road, fewer hands raised in salute. The banners are still there, but they hang lower than they once did. Your role, once essential, now feels ceremonial. You still ride out, still wear the armour, still train the lads who come up through the ranks with fire in their eyes. But even they look past you now, to the engineers sketching strange machines, or the captains drilling rows of men with pikes and gunpowder. The future no longer rides a warhorse. The first time you see the musket fired in anger, it feels like a mistake. There's no nobility in it. No dance, no duel. Just a bang, A puff of smoke and a man down. You watch it from a hill, flanked by your men, and say nothing. Later, you clean your sword anyway. Habit, perhaps, or defiance? The Lord who summoned you once for every border skirmish now sends word only in winter. Requests for grain tallies, for tax rolls, for reports on tenant movement. The battles still happen, but they are led by men with maps, not mail. Your presence is a formality. Your counsel, polite tradition. At court, the great knights gather less frequently. The old names, the ones you memorized as a squire, fade from conversation. Those who remain arrive slower, their crests more faded. You share nods, not words. No one wants to say aloud what you all know. Your armour, once polished weekly, gathers dust between uses. The squire still oils it, more out of reverence than need. It's heavy now, not just in weight but in memory. Each dent recalls a skirmish. Each rivet, a day spent living a life now fading into myth. You wear it still sometimes, for ceremonies, for parades. Once a boy asked if it was real. You no longer correct them when they call it old-fashioned. The pageantry remains, though even it begins to crack. Feast days are quieter. Fewer nobles attend. Fewer heralds call out names with the gusto they once had. The songs still praise the days of knights, but always in past tense. You listen, nod, raise a cup. You smile when they glance at you during verses that begin with, "In days of yore." In private, you walk the grounds of your estate and watch your tenants at work. They till with newer tools now. Some have coins stamped with the king's face. Others carry paper, permits, receipts, even letters, as literacy seeps into the soil. The blacksmith's son wants to be a clerk. The miller's daughter talks of schooling. These are good things, you tell yourself. But they come with a whisper. You are no longer what boys wish to become. You still train them, still swing the sword. But it is harder now. Your shoulder stiffens in the cold. Your breath shortens on uphill rides. The blade feels longer, though it is not. You grunt more when rising. And the squire, now grown, looks at you the way you once looked at your own master, half with respect, half with readiness. Even the battles you are called to feel different. You no longer ride in the vanguard. You're asked to observe, to advise. Your role is one of wisdom, not action. And while you appreciate the respect, a part of you still aches to charge, to feel the ground quake beneath your mount. You understand now, of course. The age of the knight is ending, not with a roar, but with a series of sighs. Gunpowder does not care for bloodlines. Formations do not care for honour. The knightly charge, once feared and revered, is now a target for cannon and musket shot. You've seen it. You've counted the bodies. You try not to resent it. After all, every age must end. The Romans once thought their roads would last forever. The old emperors believed their names would outlive stone. And now? Even the stones are reused for barns and chapels. Time grinds all legacies down into something more useful. Still, there is grief. Quiet, persistent. You feel it when your sword no longer draws admiration but curiosity. When your banner is recognized not for its victories, but for how long it's flown. When your warhorse dies, and the stable boy asks if you'll replace it with a mule. More practical, he says. You tell yourself that you are lucky. You lived. You saw the best and worst of your order. You earned your land, your name, your seat at the high table. You made it home. Not everyone did. Sometimes you take the long road past the old battlefield. It's farmland now. Quiet. There's a grove where the archers once stood. A ridge where the cavalry assembled. You dismount and walk it, boots sinking in soft earth. There's a marker stone, weathered and crooked. No one remembers the names carved there. You do. At night, the dreams come more frequently. Not always nightmares, though some are, but vivid flashes of moments you'd thought long buried. A lance shattering. A comrade's laugh. The exact shade of sky above a foreign field. You wake cold, and wonder why memory feels sharper than your blade. You write more now. Not orders or reports, but reflections. You try to capture what it was like. The weight of armour before dawn, the tension before a tilt, the smell of the field after rain. You want to record what it felt like to be a knight, not in legend, but in truth. You're not sure who it's for. Maybe the boy who will find it in a chest one day. Maybe no one. Visitors still come. They ask questions. Was it glorious? Was it honourable? You answer carefully, sometimes. On good days. But it was also cold and loud and lonely. You tell them that knighthood was service. Service to a lord, to a land, to an ideal. And sometimes, when the wind was right, it felt like something greater. You walk with a cane now. The squire, full grown, walks beside you and tries not to look worried. He calls you sir, still. You allow it. It costs nothing. And it reminds you that even if the age is ending, you are still its echo. You pass your sword to him one evening. Not in ceremony, just in quiet. He takes it with both hands, eyes wide. He doesn't say thank you. He doesn't have to. And so you fade, not in shame, but in rhythm. The halls grow quieter. The hearth burns lower. Your duties lessen. The land continues. The people work. And in the stillness between seasons, you feel something like peace. Let the bards sing of dragons and jewels. Let the painters render shining charges and golden spurs. You remember the cold mornings, the crooked smiles, the cracked ribs and cracked jokes, the smell of wet horse and the taste of cheap ale. That too was knighthood, and it was enough. You don't know what the world will become, only that it will become. Castles will crumble, cannons will roar. The old ways will be folded into new books, new rules, new uniforms. But perhaps in some chapel or court, a tapestry will still hang, and a child will point to the figure in the corner, the one in battered mail, and ask, "Who is that?" And maybe, just maybe, someone will remember. Not the battles, not the banners, but the man. That will be enough.